Good evening and welcome. My name is Caroline Bowman. I'm Deputy Director here at Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum. I apologize for the delay, but as you saw the pelting rain, I think that has kept some people from getting to East 91st Street in a timely manner. We are delighted to have all of you here tonight for the first ever National Design Awards jury panel, which is broadcast live on the museum's website so that we can reach audiences nationally and internationally. This is the first of a series of programs offered in conjunction with the 2007 National Design Awards. Now in their 8th year, the awards honor the best in American design across a range of disciplines. The event will be complemented in the fall by a discussion with the award winners during National Design Week. Now you might be asking, what is National Design Week? Well, this is a brand new initiative sponsored generously by Target that we started last year to promote awareness of the important role that design plays in all aspects of our lives. The education programs, panels, and online resources offered throughout the week will broaden the scope of the awards by providing platforms to discuss design and reach both the general public and school teachers and students across the country. The press release announcing the winners was just released last night. I have the great pleasure of announcing the winners to you all, the first public presentation of these stars. And speaking of these stars, we have many winners and finalists in the audience tonight, so I do ask that we hold the applause until the end of this list. And then I'd like all of you to stand up so that we can honor your achievement accordingly. First of all, the Design Patron Award, which is selected each year by the museum's director, Paul Warwick Thompson, is presented this year to Muharrem. There they are. The Corporate Achievement Award is presented to software company Adobe Systems. The Design Mind Award is presented to Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi. A special jury commendation is presented to author and educator Frank Cheng. The Communications Design Award is presented to Chip Kidd of Alfred Knopf. The Architecture Design Award is presented to the firm Office Da. The Interior Design Award is presented to Louis Sermaki Lewis. The Landscape Design Award is presented to Peter Walker and Partners. The Product Design Award is presented to Jonathan Ive of Apple. The Fashion Design Award is presented to Rick Owens. And the Lifetime Achievement Award is presented to architect Antoine Pridoc. Now if you could all... Congratulations to all of you. Just a few quick words now about the actual selection process, and then I'll turn the mic over to our jury. Nominations for the 2007 awards were solicited from more than 800 leading designers, cultural figures, educators, journalists, and corporate leaders from across the country. Nominees are then asked to submit a portfolio of up to 10 projects for the review by the jury. Chosen by Cooper-Hewitt, the jury is comprised of individuals who are deeply engaged in today's design world, and all are opinion leaders in the design field. The jury members bring a diversity of expertise that corresponds with the range of the award categories. We are so pleased to have most of the jury members here with us tonight to talk about their experience. The debate during the selection process is always quite spirited and lively. I think you would all agree. Certainly a testament to the vitality of design today. The jury's selection of winners is based on bodies of work that manifest design excellence, innovation, and long-term impact. But as you can imagine, this is not an easy task, given the hundreds and hundreds of candidates, worthy candidates. So in each case, we choose 2 additional finalists in each category. You too can have a say by voting for the People's Choice Award this fall, which will go live on the museum's website right after Labor Day, and we really encourage all of you to vote. We are thrilled to see the growth of this program over the last 8 years. The dinner sells out almost immediately, We can hardly fit the 550 guests in the tent. Now we have an after party with another, several hundred revelers. And it's wonderful to see this excitement about design today. We want you all involved, though, this year. So please do vote and mark October 18th on your calendar for what promises to be a festive, wonderful evening celebrating the winners and design. Now I'd like to introduce Reed Kroloff, the 2007 National Design Awards jury chair and tonight's moderator. Reed has been the Dean of Tulane University School of Architecture since 2004. And just this week, it was announced that he was appointed director of the Cranbrook Academy of Art and Art Museum. So congratulations, and over to you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see all of you here today. As a reformed journalist myself, I know we have a lot of the press here today, and I have covered these awards myself since their inception when I was at Architecture Magazine, and it has been great to watch them grow and change over the years and become something of real significance. And you don't really understand that quite as well as you can until you've served on the jury and been there with a group of distinguished colleagues who are working very hard to sift through what is, as always with competitions, a too large body of information in representing too many good people gathered in too quick a fashion for too short an evaluation period, and other things beginning with two. And so I do want to let you know that as the jury chair, and as someone who has run a lot of national design competitions himself, including very large ones like the Progressive Architecture Design Awards for many years, I can tell you that this was one of the best juries I've ever sat on. Everybody's opinions were strong. Everybody's convictions were backed up by intelligence rather than simply bombast. Everybody's experience made it a pleasure to work with them and broadened, I believe, it broadened my mind, and I think it did everybody else on the jury as well. Nothing was easy. No categories were decided quickly. We went over on everything, as you should, as a jury. And I'm delighted that there were some final results that might not have been expected. Not everybody, for instance, knows who Frank Ching is. But every architect and interior designer and most landscape architects in the United States has been influenced by this man for the period of my entire life. That's a pretty big achievement. And so these awards, I think it's testimony to this awards process that folks like Frank can appear as a winner at the end of the process because they just wouldn't even be in any other awards program. And so I want to commend the Cooper-Hewitt for creating a design awards program that has breadth and depth and does, in fact, assay the state of the art of design in this country each year in an important and an interesting way. It wouldn't be possible to be here to talk about this without the exceptional jury that we had working on the awards program this year, and it's my pleasure to introduce not all of them to you, but almost all of them to you, and I'm going to do that in alphabetical order. There is no order of preference here, maybe of height, but that would really be the only thing. As you will see in a minute when I introduce you to Stephen Burks of New York City, who is an industrial designer and the head of a studio that you all, I'm sure, are familiar with called Readymade Projects. He has worked on all kinds of industrial design, product design, architectural design, lighting, furniture, home accessories, you name it, in a career that, though not terribly long yet, has been remarkably productive and tremendously well documented in the media. He has projects all around the world for clients like Calvin Klein and Estee Lauder, Moroso, as well as nonprofits such as Aid to Artisans. He's a product of IIT, as well as the Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, and is now working on a documentary in Peru of his own work. Stephen Burks. You can come join us. Come and sit on the stage. right there where it says Stephen Burks. You see, we're talented, we're not very bright. So not only was there a label for each one of us on our chairs, but there was a label on this chair in case we got lost moving from there to here. One of our team members is not here with us this evening, Katerina Flicker, and we miss her this evening, but we will look forward to her being with us at the final presentation in October. But with us this evening is someone makes me very happy to see again, my colleague and friend Michael Gabellini, who's the head of Gabellini Sheppard Associates. Anybody in the New York area architectural and interior design world has followed Michael's career over 4 or 5 years at least, over the last 20 years or so, as he has taken on any number of the most significant projects, particularly in the area of fashion design and art-related projects related to art here in New York City, but also around the world, in cities as far and wide as Milan, Italy, and New York City, and I don't even know how many places. And Michael also is distinguished on this panel by being a winner of a National Design Award all those many years ago, 2006. So Michael, please join us on stage. Another member of the jury not with us tonight is Tim Gunn. I don't know where Tim is tonight, but all you have to do is turn on your TV, and certainly he will be there in reruns, if not actually himself. He's just making sure that they get it done, or whatever it is that what is it that he says to them on that? Make it work. He's making sure that it works somewhere around New York tonight. But here, also representing the world of fashion, is Yeohlee Teng. Who is herself a noted fashion designer and the head of her own fashion house, Yeohlee Inc., which she began in, I can't believe this, almost 25 years ago. It hardly seems possible that that's true. Her work has been exhibited in all around the world in all of the most important fashion capitals, with personal shows of her work in Rotterdam, Paris, London, Los Angeles, Washington, New York, and cities that I probably don't even know. Her work is on display in galleries around the world, and not little galleries, things like the Victoria and Albert. And she also is a recipient in 2004, ancient history now, of a National Design Award for the Cooper-Hewitt. Yeohlee, please join us on stage. And a final juror. It's hard to actually really think of doing a quick biography of Jim Wines because that's just not possible. So I want to just say this. He's done a whole lot of stuff for a really long time. And for those of us who are architects, and those of you and others who are artists and environmental artists, it's hard to imagine someone more influential and more active than Jim Wines and his practice and the members of it, known as SITE, who began their office something like 30 years ago. He's taught everywhere. He's lectured everywhere. He's won every award. And I told him when I was on the jury that one of his projects for the Best Products Company, do we remember Best Products, how fast things change, was one of the reasons I personally went to architecture school, which means he's very dangerous. So please help me welcome Jim Wines. Now, what we're going to do now is I am going to slide around here and use a different microphone, so hold on. One of the pleasures of being jury chair is you get to tell a lot of other people what to do. Compliant, easily knocked over people like these. But the bad side of it is that the Cooper-Hewitt gets to tell you what to do. And one of the things they told me to do this morning when I got here with no warning at all, just minutes before I arrived, was that I was to make up questions for the jury and ask them important questions. I mean, just minutes ago. So I quickly wrote 12. No, actually, I've known about this for quite a while. But we thought that it would be fun for you and perhaps enlightening about the program to spend to spend a few minutes. Is it working? See, I've already talked too much. They've turned off the mic. To spend a few minutes with the jury to ask some questions that are general in nature that might reveal a bit about what we went through in our process for the press to talk to and as that relates to the world of design today in general. So, let me start with a few of these. They've all seen these. This is not going to surprise anybody. I want to know whether you all feel, based on the work that you saw in this competition, whether American designers are leading, following, or just sort of keeping up with the international scene. It's a good question, isn't it?
Oh, God.
Quick, check the label on your clothes and see what country they were made in.
All of a sudden, we're in the hot seat.
Well, I suppose that this is a sort of setup to see how much of a cheerleader you want to be for American design.
Good point, Michael.
Don't you feel? I mean, I think that it was
Astute.
it was very much. I think that the thing which is so fascinating and so invigorating about the process is to really see the amount of exceptional work in all categories that we saw. And I think as you're always, sitting on these juries and going through these type of sort of analysis, the underlying question is any trend development which is there. And I don't think that, I can really advocate any overt trends, within American design, other than that American design is very, very healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, it's such a pluralistic moment in design in general, in architecture, interior design, product design. We saw work that varied in so many different ways and still innovative, still very interesting. And it's hard to think for me in this day and age about a kind of national movement or idea versus an international style, et cetera. So I really thought that much of the work was already global in scope, global in reach. So in terms of how it bears against international designers, I think we're in great shape, really.
Any dissent, Jim?
No, I don't dissent. Yeah, I would agree. I think that the quality of what we saw, that this is why the choices created so much argument. We really did argue a lot, and at each other's throats in some cases. And that was simply, the quality was so high. We were picking at straws of the best and the best, and then trying to measure what's best. Two people are way up there. So I think that that kind of energy came through, and I think that informed the entire choices of the jury. It was like a roll of the dice after a while. We were trading votes, I guess, because it was almost impossible in some cases to really make a final decision.
Right.
Yeohlee.
I thought it was a truly inspiring process. It's the very high caliber of work. But, as my other jurors, I think that the stage is global. So it's really difficult to make a statement about American design. Right.
I would just add that there seems to be, I've felt, I guess, a Eurocentric perspective to a lot of the design world. There's so many, such a perception of design as something that comes from a particular cultural background, et cetera. And I think that the American design culture today is really vibrant and really strong, and in terms of how it is competing internationally. It's really connected. So.
But it's interesting because, within firms, it's within an American firm there would be other nationalities working. So, there isn't such a thing now as pure American design. Mm. I'm sure you have people from different nationalities, different countries working for you, no?
Yeah.
But do you think, if you think back in fashion design, for instance, how long or how much of our younger days were characterized by comments like, oh, well, this is so French, or
Right.
that's so Italian. Or if you look at the automotive industry, it's so American, and that used to be a good thing. right? And so now, can you still make those distinctions, or is it harder and harder to do that? Is there a distinctively, not a cross-disciplinary Americanism, but is there a distinctive thing that you can take away that you believe reflects what goes on here?
Sportswear and denim.
Sportswear denim.
In product design, I mean, technology is always, we've led the way in technology for decades now. So Jonathan Ive is a great example of that, even though he's British. Right.
But I think also, I think that even 10 years ago, and certainly 5 years ago, but really like 10 years ago, I think you'd be seeing a very different type of work. Not that it would be different in and of itself, but I think less of a global reach. And also, I think there are obviously a number, think of fashion, a number of Americans that are now being hired by major labels, major European and even Asian labels. And in product design, it's just a stream runs through it. And so I think that there is, and I should also say, also educationally, I think in what we were reading through with some of the firms and the kind of people which they have within their offices. We certainly have a whole range of people internationally that we actually need to have in our studio. And we're seeing in different universities the way in which the mix of that and a lot of Asian and also Europeans that are actually traveling and deciding that they should have their design education in America rather than first seeking it in Europe or in other places. And I think so that has been a very interesting sort of trend. And obviously, as a kind of ecosystem which builds through education, something which I think is continuing to ferment and percolate from, let's say, within the country out.
Also professionally, beyond education, we see a lot of Europeans and Asians coming to America because this is kind of known as a place of innovation. America's the place where you can do anything and sort of become anything. So we don't have these sort of historical restraints that maybe it's perceived in Asia, perceived in Europe to have. So there's that freedom.
Yeah.
Jim, you practice largely overseas.
Yeah, almost completely. I was going to make a comment about, maybe everybody's waxing hyperbolic about the quality, but there seems to be a deficit also in all of this. In other words, it's something I've observed for a long time is that fundamentally the industrial age, the 20th century, movements like modernism and constructivism particularly are about 100 years old now, almost 100 years old, and they still dominate the design world. And so by being international, by having this kind of homogenization, we have basically that Eurocentric tradition exploded everywhere, and you see it everywhere. And we've been really, since we work in context, we always evolve with context, we're trying to make a big effort, especially in our office, to really think about where we are, whether in Korea or whether in Europe or wherever, and draw something from that. Also, we're, is kind of the logo of our office, we're now in the age of information and ecology, and these are both invisible forces. The industrial age is all about product and materiality, and there was a lot of vitality. You can see, Alvar Aalto and Le Corbusier and all these people getting incredibly inspired by all these new systems, new technology, new materials. But that's definitely, very old-fashioned now to be, excited about that kind of thing, when you really should be excited about. Well, for example, we saw very little about the environmental movement, very, very little commitment to environmental issues, which is the apex of the pyramid of the 21st century. So that's one big issue that I think everybody has to kind of hone in on and find a language for. I think the problem that I saw kind of across the board was there is a vitality, there is energy, but there isn't a language forming. There isn't something that you feel would be absolutely peculiar to the time we live in. So that would be something I'm missing.
Do you think that, and this is a question for everybody, but to follow up on that, and to follow up on your comments on technology, design is probably being affected by technology in a different way now than it was obviously at the beginning of the last century when it was sort of a model.
Yeah.
Now we have had the technology transform what we do and how we do it in all design disciplines. Did you all see a record of that process in the projects that we saw, in the work that we saw, in a way that excites you or concerns you?
I think the influence of technology is pervasive. I mean, in a lot of the work we saw, from architecture to product, even in fashion. And I think it's kind of something that's here to stay. And I wonder if it relates to this particular style. I don't know. It's almost as if technology has given us so much freedom that we can make anything, we can design anything, so that stylistically it may be impossible for us to return to one particular movement. I think that it's just the age where many different styles can coexist.
Yeah. Well, I think what I was emphasizing is that the climate, what I call the ambient sensibility of your time, begins to get into. I notice a lot of young people are beginning to speak differently. Their interests are very much sociological or ecological. There's a lot of students out there really energetically working on these issues in their projects. But I think that's got to become, again, what inspired the architects at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century was the advent of all of this solid structural stuff. You could express yourself because it was very sculptural. Architecture became very sculptural. But as I say, becoming very sculptural 100 years ago was really avant-garde, really exceptional. And you turn everything inside out. I said something at the end of my book on green architecture. I said, well, given ecological systems, which are all about integration of invisible forces and technology today, especially electronic technology, is all about invisible systems coming together. So probably if we really want to express the times, we should have invisible architecture. Well, at least 3 publishers called me and said, are you going to write a book on invisible architecture? And I had to assure them I didn't even know what I was talking about. It was just something off the top of my head. But it's probably, in terms of the spirit, if you were to judge what was Corbusier all about, or what was Mies van der Rohe all about, or what was anything of the 20th century, kind of early 20th century, all about. If you want to be the polar opposite, then you would be as invisible as possible. Maybe that's where we're going. Who knows? I mean, it's just a thought. I'm just, exploring what, for example, if there is an avant-garde, what they would be thinking about.
I think they're probably so invisible they didn't get nominated. So we couldn't actually talk about them.
Very good observation.
They're out there. They're working right now.
Let me observation, because you're really talking about well, also you're talking about psychology. You're really talking about architects. Are supposed to working with form, and we're on in the endless cab ride coming up here, which took an hour and 40 minutes. We were talking, obviously engaged in a dialogue. We were talking about, why do architects still, so interested in making all these shapes? And that's such an old-fashioned idea. Why aren't they more interested in exploring what the situation is, or what the invasion of information is, or what all these other forces that are, influencing? Can't they be translated into something?
But that brings us back to the actual process of making. We gave an award to Adobe Systems because they've been so influential in how we all in the design world are making things today. And so, it's really that technological innovation that's given us the freedom to make anything, which is why architects are once again thinking in this way, designers thinking in similar ways.
Let me shift it. Speaking of invisibility, one of the groups that's often hard for us to understand or hear from is the general public and its perception of all of this. And do you think that programs like this and others have actually begun to shift public perception of design in any way that's really perceivable? That's perception and perceivable in one sentence. Good. Or not. I mean, Tim's not here. We certainly see more of him on TV, right? But does that translate to anything other than a tall man? Or is there something about design that gets taken away from all of this?
Television or program?
Television, print media?
Yeah, that's I mean, I think unfortunately,
Well,
the scope of a lot of what's on television related to design is fairly narrow. I mean, it's not the broadest in terms of what we saw in the awards and the nominations. A really broad spectrum of work, but very little of that type of work makes it into the mass media. And I think that has to change if these programs are going to be more influential.
I wonder, and this is to be addressed to the institution, it's, how they get their message out beyond the interested groups to the general public. I got to answer that. Can we ask
They're
that?
going to ask that. You guys are going to answer that yourselves, right? As we go through the process of revealing the awards and
Maybe you've got Tim talking about it on TV right now. So.
It is. It's a difficult question. I mean, there's been this efflorescence of media,
may
new
I
media.
interject?
Yeah,
I mean,
interject.
I guess if the winners of the National Design Awards were able to get on Oprah, you would really be getting your message across in a big way.
So she shouldn't just have a book club. She should have a product club and a house club.
You should have a
and
National Design Award Club.
Well, I think that's.
No, I agree with you. I think that the kind of low level of the message that's getting out is the problem. And in other words, it's the lowest common denominator. By the way, I want to excuse myself tonight. I'm not trying to be Brad Pitt tonight. I have just had eye surgery, so that's why I have these dark glasses on.
You look
You ever see him
really
with
slick.
dark glasses? He must wear them in bed, for God's sake. Anyway,
Does look like.
I've seen him without them.
you've seen him without them in
Yes.
bed?
Yeah. Not in bed. But not yet.
Confession. No, I think it's that
One can dream.
I mean, Target stores is doing a pretty good job. I mean, they, I guess as one of our sponsors, they're certainly doing an excellent job of trying to bring quality design to the
They are
public.
indeed, and actually last year they paid for an insert that went into the LA Times, the New York Times. I mean, every single major newspaper across the United States had this insert about the National Design Awards and about National Design Week. So that was certainly one way to get our message across to the non-design community. And something like having a live webcast, obviously it's the design community that would be looking at this tonight. So we're trying, it's a bifurcated effort, but we're definitely trying to spread the word.
Can I, just a quick addition, and just in terms of sort of, editorial coverage of the awards, because that's something that, we rely on quite heavily to spread the word each year for this program. And just looking at the increase in outreach between 2005 and 2006, we actually doubled our outreach. So we think there's a huge audience out there, and that, what you're doing is really grabbing people's attention just based on, the coverage. And I'm touching wood also for that this year, but having just sent the release out last night. But it's definitely there. And I think certainly the People's Design Award, which had its first year last fall, over 120,000 people voted for that. We hope to double that this year. So we think we're, slowly but surely we're getting the word out. But I love the Oprah Book Club thing and Design Club. We'll work on that.
Jennifer, I really think that since my experience in 2004, the awards have gained, a huge, much larger profile. So it's credit to all of you.
I just want to ask one or two more questions because I think some of you may have questions. Am I right? Yes? All right. I want to ask Yeohlee, if you could choose one of the winners whose office you would like to work in for a year, who would it be?
Well, I can't be making choice. I mean, they're sitting right here with me.
That's okay. Not these people, not the jury.
Oh, okay.
Winners. The winners.
Oh, the winner.
The winners.
Uh-huh. I think that I would be curious about Mr. Ching's experience. And maybe a peek into his mind and mythology would be extremely interesting for me to experience.
Michael, how about you?
Well, I would have to say, certainly in terms of use and function and, a fetish as an object, it would be Jonathan Ive.
Jonathan?
I kind of want to see their offices first. I have to admit, a lot of the time as we were looking at the work, I was wondering, how are they really working? I think that would make a huge contribution to our understanding of the different studios that we looked at. I know Louis Shermaki Lewis. I've walked by their office down in the Lower East Side.
And it's a mess.
Yeah, no offense, guys.
Pigsty.
It looks like it really inspired me, actually, I have to say, because the storefront idea I really like. But I think it's important to kind of imagine how these people are working, and we think maybe, Jonathan Ives at Apple has this glistening Gattaca-like space, but maybe it's like a basement full of engineering guts or something. And but that could be cool too. So I
Okay, so who?
Okay.
That's a nice dissembling kind of moment there.
I
Now,
guess I was kind of leaning toward LTL. Yeah.
he'll be right over.
We could do a swap, studio swap.
Jim?
Well, I agree. That's a very good point. And what's the office look like? I mean, I would have to say,
Not just look like, but what is
well,
that
what it feels like.
experience?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, well, who would I choose? I would obviously choose, working with Denise Lee and my wife and our office because, after 9/11, we're 2 blocks away and we never
can't-
cleaned up afterwards.
You can't choose your own. You can't choose your own office. We're assuming you work there already.
I worked on it already. And, but on the list, Rick Owens fascinated me.
Yeah.
He really did.
Yeah.
He really fascinated me. He seemed to be one of the most talented people around. And, and again, having worked in the fashion
And he's in
industry.
Paris. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not.
well, that was one of the big arguments. You should open up the can of worms again, but is he really American because he shows and works in Paris? And we had to beg the question there. We had to ask, come on, is Gertrude Stein an American writer? Is Ernest Hemingway an American writer? Is Faulkner everybody who lived in Paris,
Josephine Baker.
Josephine Baker. Yeah, on and on. So I think we finally won out, but I find his work fascinating and just superbly talented, really, just amazing.
So everybody wants to work everywhere else. It's a good sign, and I think that it's a nice place to maybe finish this Q&A. Now, would you like me to run the part with the?
No, they haven't.
They, I mean,
They're gonna run around with that.
they're going to run around, but do you want me to point at people?
I
Do you want me to answer that
Point at
question?
people.
What was the question?
The question of where we'd want to work. As the moderator, I am not actually required to answer that question. I think I'd probably like to work at Cranbrook. Much as I hate to leave New Orleans, so that's a great question. Part of the problem is that most of these people that are sitting in here work for me, so I can't actually answer that question. If I had to choose one, I think the one that has, over the last few years of all these offices that we've seen, and there are a lot of personal friends on this list, but the office that has confounded and inspired me over and over again in a way that caused me to publish them on a regular basis and put them on lists for other commissions is Office Da. Just routinely, routinely the work is I am surprised and envious and mystified and delighted, and that's true of lots of folks on this list. So there's lots of good people here. Anyway, someone else already said LTL. But can I say something else? I would actually like, as a magazine editor, I would love to spend just 15 minutes with Chip Kidd. I mean, Jesus Christ. I put out 100 issues of that magazine and won lots of awards, and none of them, not one issue, was as good as a single cover that you do. It's amazing, amazing work. He's flashing at me. So it's incredible stuff. I mean, to look at those covers, it was fascinating to me to look at your covers and to look at the work of Jonathan Ive, and to, his stuff is so slick and sexy, and you don't. I mean, I don't. Yours, you need a towel when you're done with your work, you know, and it's just. It was fascinating to see the profusion of ideas just literally leaping off the page.
I found the work very experiential, actually. I mean, you're something about. I don't know if there's a connection to architecture in your background or not, but something about the covers, you know, there seemed to be so much space happening.
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty compelling for me.
Really great stuff. So it was, what a group of people. Very, very hard to choose. Very, very hard to choose. And that's why we gave not only awards to all of these people that are here today, but a group of folks that were, you know, also design, the other designers that are mentioned in each category, at least 2 in each category. I think everybody on this jury would tell you that any one of those people could have walked home with an award like this. They're all exceptional folks. So it's been great. I want to work in a lot of these offices. Now, I'd like to stand here and point at people who have questions for anybody up on stage. Jeffrey?
I was talking to him earlier, actually. These awards really were started as a fundraiser for the museum, and they've been very successful. I think some of us are still waiting for the Cooper-Hewitt, as the National Design Museum, to define design. That it still hasn't been defined, and if the American culture has a problem, they can think of fashion designers, they can pick different categories, and it may be helpful to see who the new hot class is in all these different disciplines, but they're really looking for, I think, a better definition of that. So I'm still looking for criteria. So some of us are invited every year to submit names. The real question is, how are they going to be judged? And it seems very dependent on the caliber of the jury every year, and the jury is never known until after the fact.
So is that a question?
Is the museum intending in the future, now that it's doing a broader outreach through Target and so forth, to begin to define design?
That sounds like a question for you. You want to answer that?
It's a big question. We absolutely are through our programs, and we are in the planning stages of a major renovation where we'll have a whole third-floor gallery to help expand our message through exhibitions, because we do feel a bit constricted in this beautiful yet small 9,000 square foot mansion.
Rather than examples, in words, in a paragraph or two.
Absolutely. I will share what we have and see if you agree.
As part of the jury, though, I have to admit, as when I was asked to be in the jury, we look at the to arrive here and look at the people that were nominated. You do sort of want to reflect on a number of criteria, and it is a very privileged position to be in, first of all, and on the other hand, there was so much that I learned from my fellow jurors that you kind of would like to have a quote-unquote number of references in which to begin to judge or determine, the appropriate selection process in a way. Because a lot of what we experienced, even though, full of wit, intelligence, and everything, was in a lot of ways emotional. I mean, their design provokes an emotional response, and you see something and you love it. And a lot of the work we know from our profession, but a lot of the work we didn't know, and a lot of the work I found it hard to, or difficult to really come to terms with very quickly. And I think that something like a criteria, I think that Jeffrey's responding to would really help all of us, I think, do a better job in service of the museum and in service of the nominations.
I want to just add a possible counter to that, although I agree with what you're saying. But having run the Progressive Architecture Design Awards for 5 years, where there are no criteria other than the fact that they're unbuilt, That's the only thing that is the requirement. And it's all architecture. But the point I was going to make is, it's fascinating how that slice every year, and I know that the architects who are in this audience have won those awards. It's amazing. It's interesting how a slice through that every year reveals a remarkably accurate picture about the state of the art of the profession of architecture in this country, because there are only Americans entering in that particular program, every year. And if you go back and you look at 25 years of that program, you can trace the arc of contemporary architecture in the United States remarkably clearly, with no instruction to the jury whatsoever, other than choose as many projects as you like that are good. Nothing about numbers, nothing about types, just choose what you want. And so it's fascinating, that's the other side of that coin, is no guidance. I think where this program has both a challenge and potentially great service is its interdisciplinarity. Can you, the question becomes to me, can you slice across 7, 8 disciplines, 10 disciplines, and still reveal something that traces that same arc about the trajectory of design in this country? I don't know. That's a hard one. That's a very hard one.
Well, Jeff brings up a very good question. It is, and it's can any institution ever really contribute to culture or define it, or are they always after the fact? I reminded when Alfred Barr was trying to raise money to start the Museum of Modern Art, he went to Gertrude Stein and asked her for money. He says, "I'm not going to give any money. How can you be a museum and modern?" She was absolutely right. She was right on target. And it's interesting. Then she sort of became not right, because MoMA did have an incredibly vital period in the 60s and 70s, a really energetic period. And now it's like death warmed over today. And it's been replaced by the Met. The Met is alive, fun.
But has the modern ever defined modern art?
Well, no, that's the thing. That's how I'm getting to that point, is that I think what happens is that a good institution becomes an advocate institution. They just see something happening and they just go for it. Mm-hmm. And they take risk. My favorite quote of all time is, and I use it in almost every lecture, is Oscar Wilde: "An idea that isn't dangerous isn't worthy of being called an idea." And so I think if museums would take, if the Cooper-Hewitt would take that position and show things, for example, that, well, in my case, I never had a call from this museum until I was asked to be on the jury. And I figured, well, they went through 5 other jurors and they refused, so they came to me. and because they know I'm, really anti-formalist. I really don't like that kind of stuff. And so they don't want to show that. They don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So I think they have to open up the dialogue. So you have something on sustainability, you have something on ecological design, you have something on anti-formalism, you have something on, you have all of these vital things going on out there, and you have to embrace them. And in some cases, you have to follow them up. I mean, MoMA in its heyday, Dorothy Miller, I remember, was just, he was in your studio every day. I mean, she was just like visiting around. She was nosing around. She was searching. She was always looking. She was like an art dealer almost. She was always searching for things. And I think that that's a very important role for her. I mean, you can't sit at your desk and understand an art form. That's the point.
Right, but I think the selection of our exhibitions at the moment is a perfect example of how Cooper-Hewitt is trying to attack this exact problem. I mean, we have the beautiful contrast of the National Design Triennial, which is the survey of contemporary design, next to Design for the Other 90%, which is addressing the 90% of this world that lives below the poverty level. So, talk about two different,
Absolutely.
yeah, so.
More questions from out there in the invisible quarter? Yes.
I'll stick my neck out. We all know what bad design is. At least we think we know. And the thing that amazes me is that we can't quite decide what good design is. I teach now a lot. I was an industrial designer for years with George Nelson. And a few other places. But now I'm teaching, and I've been teaching for quite a few years, and I find that we have to look at things from so many points of view now. We have to consider ecologically. We have to consider whether it's really working, it solves a problem. What is the material? Is it green? I mean, I don't think we can say design is good or bad per se, the way we used to visually, with visual language anymore. I think we have to say it's good from this point of view and from this point of view. And it's much more complex, as everything else is. And of course, we're designing eventually something to do everything that you can't even see. So that's another aspect. But I think what I'm asking you is, how do you know, if you know what something bad is, how do you know what something good is? I'd like you to discuss it.
Michael Gabellini.
Yeah, that's a good, bad question. Because I think that it is something which is intuitive, if you allow that to run through a discourse where it's something which, like an odor, you can sense far away or near. But like an odor, it can also be something which is, it has a sort of psychological dimension to it that is also, I think, sort of memory-based, that is reminding you of something which, in effect, may not be, in fact, in front of you, but something which does have invisible or even fleeting characteristics. I mean, as an architect, interior designer, I agree that in this world today, we're confronted with mounting complexity in order to solve simple things, or things that, frankly, are the same things that have been tried to be solved in space planning, in good lighting, in good air, things that are creative or things that are more technically oriented. Do I have an answer for what good design is? No. But I think that it is something which, in this jury, one thing which was a point of discussion is with these, frankly, fairly defined framework in which we are working in about excellence, about innovation, and about a body of work that has led to a substantial or, let's say, a value-based tradition in the way in which creating a new paperclip and allowing that paperclip to be more efficient, that you could describe as something which is incrementally good. So I think that on this jury, there was a lot of discussion with the guidelines of having this framework set up and deciding whether all of these things, or the designers, or something which is product-based, or something which is environmental, like Peter Walker and his work, that it was very difficult to try to place it within those categories. And I think that after a while, the discussion became much more free-flowing, and the framework dissolved a bit. And then I think that it was something which there was much more evaluation based on individual jurors' experience and also ability to actually understand cross-discipline work which they have very little reason to actually being in the position to critique or be a juror of. And so that, I think, is something that, in a way, as a kind of collaborative debate, for example, fashion, which was one of these central discussions and debate, national, as a kind of nationalistic thing, whether a American designer that is now working in Europe actually is American design, and how you evaluate that, rather than a sort of evaluation of good or bad.
That touches
I want to
upon the-
float something out that pertains to fashion and clothing and good design, perhaps. I think that one way that one could think about it is less waste. So you would have a successful design if you could utilize the total width of the fabric and make a decision that your garment is going to take 2 yards, successfully make something out of the 2 yards of fabric that everyone can wear. And a case in point, good example is a sarong. Very successful garment, eternal. Uses the full width of the material, there's no waist. One size fits all, unisex. Extremely successful design. And that would be one way that I could define good design. And it's eternal.
Defining good design is also, I mean, that's a transcendent one. And there are a lot of sort of transcendent opportunities for defining good design. They change, of course. It's situational often because the subject matter is so different. Jim quoted one old dead white male. I'll quote one older. That's, you know, there are a lot of definitions for good design, but one that seems to me remarkably elastic and timeless is Vitruvius, the triad: firmness, commodity, and delight. Firmness meaning, let's do something that will hold up. It'll stand up. It'll serve its purpose in a physical way. Commodity meaning that it doesn't just perform the function at hand, but gives you the opportunity for enrichment in some fashion. And then delight, that ineffable, hard to define characteristic that says it gave me a little tingle. And that's, you know, the difference between design and simply function. And that you can take that definition and move it all around over and over and over again, but 2,000 years or more after it was coined, it still works.
But I guess
And that to me is good design.
Go ahead.
After you, no.
All right. Well, I would take issue with that to some extent, because, and it also was interesting because we were put in a kind of curatorial role. I mean, we're all kind of in our real life roles, and all of a sudden we're in a museum and an institution, so we're sort of like have the same problems the curators have of sorting things out. Now, you quoted your definition, or a definition of design. But, you know, I sort of live my life. I mean, I love Marcel Duchamp, and I taught myself to contradict myself in order to avoid conforming to my own taste. And to me, that's a much more, because to me, it has to be in the realm of ideas.
Well, that's where
If it isn't in the
innovation-
realm of ideas, then I'm not interested. If it's just form, or shape, or volume, or materials, or function, or any one of these things, if it doesn't really tick off my mind and make me think about something, I would say if it's good art, if it's good anything, it isn't what it is, it's what it makes you think about. And I've sort of lived by that, and I find that there are many interesting things. And it's also, again, since we were like curators in a way here, I don't know whether we did the right thing or the wrong thing. That's hard to say because we have different points of view and we're arguing about certain candidates. But I think the bottom line is we all agreed that these, almost everybody we nominated was really talented, but whether they satisfied our own criteria, and that's very hard. And I think a curator in a museum has to have that flexibility. I always think of Dorothy Miller because she was an outstanding, and Alfred Barr because they really did put together an amazing museum together. But they did have amazing flexibility. They could take absolute minimalism on one side and pop art on the other. And they could really bridge these gaps. And I remember at the AA in London, who was the curator there, the head of the AA in London? When? Oh, in the beginning, he started it. Yeah, I remember.
It's Alvin Boyarsky.
Alvin Boyarsky, yeah. And I remember him, he had a remarkable capacity. He would invite you for a lecture and everything, and it would always be kind of a controversial situation. But he had a remarkable capacity, no matter, you never knew exactly what he believed, but he believed in the bigger picture. And you always had the feeling this guy is in touch with God, or something. He really knows a lot more than me. But he always made the person, the guest, speaker or whatever, feel like he really believed in your ideas. He really supported them. And then the next one he would make feel equally welcome and equally. So in a way, he was like a master curator because he invited these incredible conflicts. And one thing they did at the AA in London, they had this big bar on the ground floor. It was the only school in the world with a really heavy drinking bar. And what would happen? You go upstairs to the lecture hall, having this incredible battle, where you'd literally strangle your opponent, like Peter Eisenman, for example. Something like that. And you just can't stand one more word this guy's going to say. And then you go downstairs, you start drinking, you love each other. So I think that's part of being a curator, too. That's part of an institutional mandate for the future, perhaps. Go ahead.
Did you want to add to
I
that?
forgot. No. I'm kidding. No, I did have. I was just going to say that. I mean, for me, good design is we're all sort of defining it in a very Western sense. You know, the Vitruvian reference and talking about the AA, et cetera. But there, you know, it's
The sarong is
the sarong.
it's not Western.
That's why I thought of it, because the sarong brings the bigger question of cultural influence and what good design is here in America, or specifically here in New York, to us 5 people is very different than what good design is, say, in Africa or, you know, in certain parts of Asia. And even though we are in this global economy now, we're still kind of in our specific insular worlds. And I think that there's a lot of influence that's coming to bear on our perception of good, bad, ugly, echo or not, you know, that's coming from different places. And innovation, which we didn't touch upon, might be the 4th, you know, because the good design standard, if it is Vitruvian, that's where obviously all of the nominations fit. But then how do they make that leap to being innovative or being...
That's the 5th dimension.
Yeah, I mean, and
the
I don't know if it's
invisible
the tickle dimension that you're talking
No,
about. But
it could be outside. I mean, it does
outside
tickle
of the
you, but it
tickle
could be one all
dimension.
by itself.
But it's privilege. You know, we're
so
all
is that-
extremely privileged to be able to be sitting here discussing good design.
Right.
That's
right.
true.
And you have to reach a certain point in civilization to have that privilege.
Yeah.
Let me open it up. We do have a question back here.
My question is in clothing. If something doesn't sell well off the racks, can it still be good design?
Yeohlee?
Why not? It depends on how you define good design.
Is commercial success a factor in defining something that's good design or not?
I think that, you know, if you're a manufacturer, yes. If you're a designer, maybe not. So it really depends on what you're aspiring toward. However, there is a real charge in being able to make something that has 100% sell-through, because it tells you that you found an audience that really believes in your product. But, you know, I think that there's a, you know, clothing design and fashion, it's a very funny animal because everybody wears clothes. But there is a group of 100 that seems to feel that fashion is on a different plane from all of us who wear clothes. So, you know, I could throw the question back at you. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you're a designer in business and you make a living at that. If you weren't making a living at it, would you still be a clothing designer or would you be some other kind of designer? I mean, there is some connection to commercial success which drives your ability to design.
Oh, but of course, I mean, all of us.
And also when you judge,
Successful
when
in
you
what we
look at
do.
things, I mean, is something that has great commercial success, is that work against, say, being considered great design because it does have mass appeal?
You know, we looked at a designer.
I mean, I woke up this morning preparing for a meeting with a residential client. And this was the meeting today to talk about the bedroom and bath and what the bath was going to be. And of course, you know, in a house, you have bathrooms to design and you have toilets to pick out. And each designer, I think, you know, begins to get familiar with the glut of product that gets put onto the market and runs through the house that you have to continually sort through in your library that gets developed, that gets redeveloped, re-edited, and thrown out, and new product being brought in. And the end of this little sort of litany today was a very depressing end, where Kohler makes one extremely good toilet for me, which is the Trocadero. You
heard it here.
Fabulous, fabulous design. And I woke up this morning, we called, you know, what color do you have? Do you have it in this color? I'm sorry, it's discontinued. So, for 12 years, I've been specified getting up in the morning, going to work, knowing that out there is Trocadero. So you can live easier as a designer knowing that you have this small, good design to offer my small, but very well exposed clients, very passionate. And now I realize that what I have are these 3 other toilets that have been on the market for many more years. I can't even remember the name of it. The Embarcadero, I think, is another one. Trocadero, Embarcadero. And, like Steuben, like George Jensen, like a number of other, companies, like Crate & Barrel, going back to the 70s, and what the Crate & Barrel was, I mean, as a design company, to what it now has become. This glut of product was just swamping the market that is actually putting out of production absolutely classic, timeless, good design that is lost. So that is my kind of retort to that. I've lost my Trocadero.
We almost gave an award to another designer, in the end we didn't, who labored his entire life in near anonymity, producing dozens and dozens of products for one company, for Sears, including maybe his lifetime achievement. And this guy was interesting because at a time when very few African Americans were in the design world in a significant place, he was. The epitome or the apogee of his design career was the development of a garbage can. Now, that might not at first seem like something to which you might aspire in your career as you started off as a designer. But this man addressed every problem he faced, from garbage cans to sewing machines to furniture to you name it, he designed it with the same dogged determination to, at the end of the day, simply make a product that worked well, would hold up, and appealed to a mass audience. Did he receive a lot of money for this? No. Did he receive a lot of fame for this? No.
George Harrison.
Charles Harrison. George Harrison did another thing.
And I checked with these guys. I was like, I said that during the jury, too, I believe. It's Charles Harrison.
Let's turn this thing around.
Sure.
If something sells really, really well, is it good design?
Well, see,
I mean, if you're going to ask,
The answer is no.
No.
Well,
Because everything sells well at Pottery Barn,
I think the
and
issue-
that stuff's
no.
dreck.
but it's a valid thing to discuss.
it's really about access, though.
don't
It's
you
about,
think
I
so?
really think it's about access.
Again, let's go back to
Because it sounds doesn't make it
definition of good
bad.
design, I mean, we've been chosen by the National
Here we go,
Design
we're
Museum
beating ourselves again.
to determine what was good design and what wasn't. But
Right.
the people at Pottery Barn are allowed to choose their products as
And people buy it.
Well, let's-
Someone likes it.
Let's turn
But
to
it's
this.
like, it's like design on a dime. I mean, who wants to even imagine having to watch that show and be informed about, what design is? But yet, there it is. It's out in front of you. And that is becoming, it's whatever beacon it is for as a popularity to how people get initiated and housewives get enamored of, how they can design on a dime.
Let me turn out here to the audience because we've got another audience comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you guys are talking about the general public now kind of having these boring interests almost, from a design standpoint. And if something sells very well, then it's not good design. Well, isn't the point of these awards kind of to bring design to the public? So, I mean, I feel like as a designer, when I think about the general public, I don't really like microphones, but when I think about
They need the mic to put it onto the simulcast.
okay.
So
when I think about the general public, I mean, it's not exciting. I think designers always want to push things forward, and designers feel like we have this great taste level that the rest of the country doesn't have. So why don't we bring this and have people want it? But then the reality is, a lot of times people aren't interested in that because it's maybe too far out of their reach. So they go to Pottery Barn. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you even think designers almost care about knowing? Earlier you said that you wanted to sort of know, I remember you saying about wanting to know about what the general public wants, but to me it almost feels more like designers don't care, almost. Like they're more interested in kind of what they feel and kind of pushing their own aesthetic, and aren't so much interested in what the reality of what
That's a
people
pretty
want.
serious indictment.
I think that
Well, no, I don't think that's completely true. But I do think that it goes back to, again, we are the kind of become a little bunch of curators, and the Cooper-Hewitt curates, and they look for things. The question of advocacy, I mean, somebody has to advocate art, and artists are often their ego trips and doing their thing, and that's, I think, as they should do, because, and they're very observant, some of the most brilliant ones. But also this idea of whether, if the person's successful, meaning popular or not popular. I mean, two of the greatest artists of all time are certainly Michelangelo and Pablo Picasso. They were extremely rich and extremely shrewd business people. They really were. And, Marcel Duchamp, another great artist, was not.
But designers aren't artists.
So, I mean, they aren't.
I mean, we're not, no, honestly, we're not artists. I mean, industrial design is designed for industry. And so speaking to the public, if we're designing for industry then offers that product to the public. So it's not as if we have a direct channel to what the public wants. I mean, I personally, working for different companies, have to try to design what's appropriate for my client, the manufacturer, the factory. The factory then, reliant on all of their expertise, marketing, advertising, et cetera, then tries to get that product, the right product, to the right consumer. So, in a lot of ways, we're cut out of the cycle of design for the general public. Someone like Charles Harrison, in an age when industrial designers were working in-house for the big corporations and were really part of the chain of development, had the opportunity to work on products that did have a direct link to the general public. And I think today, a lot of us don't have that type of access, and we really, I would love to, do flower pots or whatever, whatever they're buying at Pottery Barn. I would love to work with these people, these companies that have this type of reach, and to do that Trocadero, to do that toilet that everybody wants. I mean, I'm eager to do that kind of work, but having access to that kind of work.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I didn't finish my point, by the way, because I think the point is
make it quick, 'cause we're running out of time.
I mean, if you are commercially successful, have you sold your soul? And I think that's true. And I think whether it's industrial design or anything, I think there are progressive thinkers who do things that are ahead of their time and don't always get recognized, but need an advocate, for example, to make it clearer what they're doing. And then there are other people who just, for whatever reasons, catch on very, very quickly. I mean, I don't think the general public understood Cubism or even still understand it, but somehow it grew into everything else, and it became a very, very important movement in the arts. I mean, it influenced architecture, it influenced fashion, it influenced everything. So one has to trace it back to Picasso and say, well, this guy was really a genius, and he wasn't successful instantaneously, but I think their ideas, if you're dealing in the realm of ideas, sometimes they're immediately recognized and they're great, and sometimes it takes a while for them to sink in. But again, I go back to kind of design competitions and the Cooper-Hewitt, and what they're doing is the role is to get those ideas out there and let people know about them, let people understand them. I think, by the way, since Reed was not properly introduced tonight, I've known him for years, and I think he's an extraordinary figure. I mean, as you can certainly see from how articulate he is, but he's not only a designer, an educator, has an incredible voice, public voice, but he's also one of the great advocates of design in the world. I think everybody should applaud him.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Okay, now I'm thoroughly embarrassed, but I appreciate that. I really do. And I agree with the part about advocacy. It is critical, and I think that what the Cooper-Hewitt is doing and what this group of people who you can see tonight are thoughtful, opinionated, strong in their convictions, and talented. You can get, I think, from this conversation, just a little glimpse of what it was like to be inside the jury process at this particular design award. And as someone who's worked with a lot of juries and over a long period of time, I personally want to say thank you to all of you for the tremendous work. This was a lot of work, tremendous work that you did, and for the excellent results. I want to thank the Cooper-Hewitt and all of those Cooper-Hewittites that are watching on the web right now for sponsoring these awards year in and year out, and making a leap at least into what is dangerous territory, obviously, because it is the territory of ideas. But most importantly, I want to thank this group of people right here that are sort of smeared around in the center, who are our winners, at least the group of them that are here tonight, because they're the reason that we came together to do all of this. These are the people whose ideas are going to be influencing us for a great period of time, I believe. And I'm delighted, for one, to have been able to take part in this. So thank you all. Get out there and advocate for them.